The arrival. The sky above the human mining colony burned a deep orange as smoke from distant explosions filled the air. Panic gripped the settlers as alarms wailed across the outpost. Families huddled together in fear, while soldiers scrambled to their positions, rifles trembling in their hands. They all knew the truth. They were outnumbered, and the enemy was closing in. Commander Riley stood at the gates, her face grim. She had seen war before, but this was different. The invaders weren't just after their resources. They wanted complete annihilation. The towering creatures, with their dark, spindly limbs and glowing red eyes, moved with a precision that suggested something more than brute force. Their attacks were calculated, relentless, and terrifying. "We can't hold them off much longer," one of her officers muttered. Riley ignored him, her sharp eyes scanning the horizon. She refused to give in to despair, even as the odds stacked against them. Then, as if summoned by her thoughts, a figure appeared in the distance. At first, Riley thought it was another enemy scout. The shape was tall and broad, moving with an unearthly grace. It carried no visible weapon, but radiated a strange, commanding presence. As it drew closer, the soldiers at the gate raised their rifles, ready to fire. "Hold your fire," Riley ordered, raising a hand. Something about the figure made her hesitate. It wasn't moving like the other invaders. There was no aggression, no haste. Whoever, or whatever, it wasn't here to attack. Not yet. The figure stopped just beyond the gate, standing in the open. The dust cleared enough to reveal more of its form. It was an alien, but not like the invaders. Its armor shimmered like liquid metal, reflecting the fiery sky. Two piercing, golden eyes stared back at them, glowing softly against its dark, textured skin. A long cloak, tattered and weathered, billowed behind it. The soldiers whispered nervously among themselves, their fear palpable. Riley stepped forward, keeping her rifle lowered but her guard up. "Who are you?" she demanded. Her voice carried the weight of authority, but even she couldn't hide the slight tremor in her tone. The alien tilted its head, studying her. When it spoke, its voice was deep and resonant, each word deliberate and clear. "I am Tarthar," it said. "This place, it is mine." Riley frowned. "What do you mean, yours? This colony belongs to humanity." Zarthar's gaze didn't waver. "The soil, the skies, the life beneath, none of it belongs to you. But I am not here to debate ownership. I am here to protect what is mine." His words sent a ripple of confusion through the soldiers. Riley narrowed her eyes. "Protect it? From who?" Zarthar gestured toward the horizon, where another explosion lit up the sky. "From them," he said simply. "The ones you call invaders. They seek to destroy this world, to strip it of its essence. I will not allow that." The soldiers exchanged uneasy glances. Was this some kind of trick? Riley didn't trust easily, especially not in the middle of a war. But there was something about Zarthar, something in his voice, and the way he carried himself, that made her pause. "Why should we believe you?" she asked, her voice sharp. "For all we know, you're one of them." Zarthar's expression didn't change, but his voice took on an edge of impatience. "If I were with them, you would already be dead. I do not waste words on those I do not value." The bluntness of his statement silenced everyone. Riley felt the weight of his words, as though they carried a truth too heavy to dismiss. Still, she wasn't ready to lower her guard. "If you're here to help," she said carefully, "prove it." Zarthar's eyes glowed brighter for a moment, and he turned toward the horizon. "They are coming," he said. "I suggest you prepare." Before Riley could respond, a deafening roar erupted from the distance. The ground trembled beneath their feet as a swarm of invaders appeared on the ridge. Their shadows stretched long and menacing in the dying light, their numbers far greater than anyone had feared. Panic rippled through the soldiers. Riley barked orders, snapping them out of their paralysis. "Physicians, hold the line." Zarthar stepped closer to the gate, his towering form radiating calm amidst the chaos. "You will see," he said quietly. "I protect what's mine." As the first wave of invaders charged down the ridge, HFY raised a hand. A low hum filled the air, and the ground beneath the invaders cracked and shifted as if the planet itself were answering his call. The soldiers watched in stunned silence as a wall of energy erupted in front of the colony, stopping the attackers in their tracks. Riley stared at HFY, her mind racing. Who was this alien? And what did he mean by protecting what's mine? For now, she had no choice but to trust him. The battle was far from over, and if HFY could help them survive, she would take that chance. The gates opened just enough for HFY to step inside. As he walked past Riley, he said only one thing: "Prepare yourselves. This is just the beginning." The Alliance. The morning after the first battle was eerily silent. Smoke lingered over the charred battlefield, and the faint smell of burning metal and ash hung in the air. Inside the colony, tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Humans huddled in small groups, whispering about the strange alien who had saved them the night before. Was he a savior, or a threat waiting for the right moment? Commander Riley sat at the center of the command tent, her fingers drumming on the table as she stared at the holographic map of their surroundings. Every movement in the colony had been mapped, every escape route planned, but none of it felt like enough. Across from her, HFY stood motionless, his golden eyes fixed on the map. He hadn't spoken since entering the colony, his imposing presence unnerving the soldiers who dared to glance his way. Riley finally broke the silence. "Why are you really here?" she asked, her voice sharp. She didn't have time for half-truths or cryptic declarations. "You said you're here to protect what's yours, but this isn't your colony. Explain." HFY didn't look at her. Instead, he reached out and traced a line on the holographic map with his clawed finger. "This world," he said, his voice low but resonating with authority, "was once a sanctuary. My kind protected it for millennia, ensuring its balance was never disrupted. When we were gone, you came." He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "And now, they come to destroy it all." Riley narrowed her eyes. "So, what are we? Intruders? Invaders? You don't seem too concerned about protecting us." HFY tilted his head slightly, considering her words. "You are the lesser of two evils," he said. "You dig, you take, but you do not seek to annihilate. The ones out there," he gestured toward the horizon, where the invaders were regrouping, "are far worse. They will drain this world until nothing remains, not even ash." The room fell silent again. Riley leaned back in her chair, weighing her options. Trusting HFY felt like gambling with lives she couldn't afford to lose, but the alternative was facing an enemy they had no hope of defeating on their own. "What do you want from us?" she asked finally. "If you're offering help, name your terms." HFY stepped closer to the table, his towering form casting a shadow over her. "I will fight," he said simply, "but I cannot win this war alone. Your people must follow my lead. No hesitation, no doubt. If you do this, I will ensure your survival." Riley bristled at the commanding tone, but held her ground. "We're not your soldiers, HFY. If you want cooperation, you'll need to earn trust." HFY's eyes glowed faintly, and for a moment, Riley thought he might lash out. But instead, he straightened, his voice softening. "Trust is a fragile thing among your kind," he said, "but time is not on your side. The invaders will strike again, and when they do, your defenses will crumble without me." Before Riley could respond, the tent flap opened, and one of her officers stepped in, his face pale. "Commander," he said, his voice shaking, "we've detected movement. A large force is heading our way." Riley stood abruptly. "How large?" The officer hesitated, glancing nervously at HFY. 3 times what we faced last night. Maybe more." The words hit like a hammer. The colony barely survived the first wave. And now this. She turned to Xarthar, desperation creeping into her voice. If you have a plan, now's the time to share it. Xarthar nodded. There is a weapon, he said. An artifact buried deep beneath this planet. It is the only thing that can repel them. But it requires activation. I can guide you to it. A weapon? Riley's skepticism returned. Why not use it yourself? Why bring us into this? Xarthar's gaze hardened. Because it is not just a weapon. It is a bond. A link between the living and the world itself. It requires more than strength. It requires unity. I cannot activate it alone. Riley hesitated, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Could she trust him? Did she even have a choice? Finally, she nodded. Fine. We'll follow your lead. But if this is some kind of trick, it is not. Xarthar interrupted. You will see the truth soon enough. He turned to leave, his cloak trailing behind him like a shadow. Riley watched him go, her gut twisting with uncertainty. She wasn't sure if she'd just made the colony's salvation or its doom. Outside, the soldiers were already preparing for battle, their fear palpable. Xarthar moved among them like a ghost, silent and unyielding. He stopped near a group of young recruits, his glowing eyes scanning their faces. Fear will not save you, he said, his voice calm but firm. Courage will. The recruits straightened under his gaze, determination replacing their doubt. It was a small moment, but Riley noticed. Maybe, just maybe, Xarthar was exactly what they needed. But the invaders were closing in fast, and the first test of their fragile alliance was about to begin. The hidden weapon. The next day dawned with an unnatural stillness, as though the planet itself was holding its breath. The invaders had paused their assault, giving the colony a moment of uneasy peace, but Commander Riley knew it wouldn't last. In the command center, soldiers scrambled to repair damaged equipment, patch holes in the defenses, and ready themselves for the next wave. Xarthar, however, stood apart, gazing toward the distant mountains with an unreadable expression. Riley approached him, her boots crunching on the gravel-strewn ground. You said there's a weapon, she began, cutting straight to the point. Where is it? Xarthar turned to face her, his golden eyes glowing faintly. Beneath the ground, in the ancient catacombs of this planet. It is a place your kind would not dare to tread. Try us, Riley shot back. She crossed her arms, her tone laced with challenge. If it's our only shot, we'll go wherever we need to. The alien warrior regarded her for a moment before nodding. The journey will not be easy, he warned. The catacombs are alive with defenses, mechanisms left behind by my people to guard what lies within. Only those deemed worthy will pass. Riley bristled. Worthy? Who decides that? Xarthar didn't answer. Instead, he gestured toward the colony's perimeter, where a group of soldiers was waiting with an armored transport. Gather your best, he said. We leave now. The journey to the catacombs was tense and silent. The transport rumbled across the barren landscape, kicking up clouds of dust as it navigated the rocky terrain. Riley sat in the cockpit, her hands resting on the control panel. Xarthar sat beside her, his massive frame taking up more than his share of space. The soldiers in the back whispered nervously, their voices barely audible over the hum of the engine. Tell me something, Riley said, breaking the silence. Why didn't your people use this weapon when the invaders first came? Xarthar's gaze remained fixed on the horizon. The weapon is not a tool of war, he said. It is a bond, a covenant between the living and the planet itself. To use it is to give oneself to the planet entirely. Riley frowned. What does that mean? It means, Xarthar said slowly, that the one who wields it may not return. The weight of his words settled heavily over the cockpit. Riley glanced at him, searching his expression for any hint of doubt, but his face was as impassive as ever. The entrance to the catacombs was a jagged opening in the side of a mountain, partially concealed by thick vines and rocky debris. Xarthar led the group inside, his movements confident and purposeful. The air grew colder as they descended, and a faint, eerie glow emanated from the walls, illuminating the narrow path. "This place gives me the creeps," one of the soldiers muttered. "Stay focused," Riley snapped, her voice sharp. "We're here to get the job done." As they ventured deeper, the path opened into a vast chamber. The walls were etched with intricate patterns, pulsating faintly with a light that seemed alive. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, and on it rested a strange, crystalline object that shimmered with an inner fire. Xarthar approached the pedestal, his steps careful. "This is the heart of the planet," he said. "It is the key to the weapon." Before anyone could respond, the chamber trembled. The walls seemed to shift, and the glowing patterns morphed into jagged, menacing shapes. A low, resonant hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. "What's happening?" Riley demanded, raising her rifle. Xarthar didn't answer. Instead, he turned to the group, his expression grave. "The catacombs are testing us. Stand firm, or they will destroy you." The hum escalated into a deafening roar, and the ground beneath their feet cracked open. From the fissures emerged mechanical constructs, their forms sleek and insect-like, their movements unnervingly precise. They swarmed toward the group, their glowing eyes locked onto the humans. "Open fire," Riley shouted, and the chamber erupted into chaos. The soldiers fought valiantly, their bullets tearing through the constructs. But for every one they destroyed, two more seemed to take its place. Riley's heart pounded as she dodged a swipe from one of the machines, her rifle blazing. She glanced at Xarthar, who stood in the center of the fray, his movements fluid and calculated as he dismantled the constructs with his bare hands. "This isn't working," one of the soldiers yelled. "We're going to be overrun." Xarthar's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "The heart reacts to courage and unity. Fight not for yourselves, but for each other. That is the only way to survive." Riley gritted her teeth, his words echoing in her mind. She barked orders, directing her team to cover one another, to protect the weak points in their formation. Slowly, the tide began to turn. The constructs faltered, their movements growing erratic, as though they sensed the group's newfound resolve. Finally, the last construct fell, and the chamber grew silent once more. Riley lowered her rifle, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She turned to Xarthar, who stood unarmed, the heart now glowing brightly in his hands. "You were right," she admitted reluctantly. "We couldn't have done this without you." Xarthar inclined his head. This was only the beginning. The true test lies ahead. As the group regrouped, Riley couldn't shake the feeling that they had just crossed a threshold, one that would change everything. The heart pulsed in Xarthar's hands, its light casting eerie shadows on the walls. Whatever lay ahead, there was no turning back now. Betrayal in the ranks. The colony was shrouded in an uneasy quiet when Commander Riley and her team returned from the catacombs. Soldiers lined the barricades, their eyes darting nervously between the horizon and the armored transport rumbling into the compound. The air was heavy with tension, not just from the looming threat of the invaders, but from the arrival of Xarthar. His presence had sown seeds of doubt among the already strained ranks. As Riley stepped out of the transport, the heart of the planet secure in her hands, she could feel the unease ripple through her people. Whispers spread like wildfire. "Why are we trusting an alien? He could be leading us into a trap. What if he's working with the invaders?" Xarthar followed behind her, his golden eyes scanning the colony with calm detachment. The alien warrior seemed impervious to the hostile stares and muttered accusations, but Riley knew better. His silence was deliberate, a test to see how far the humans could be pushed before breaking. "Commander," Lieutenant Grayson called, approaching her with a stiff salute. "We've had developments while you were gone." Riley frowned. "What kind of developments?" Grayson hesitated, glancing at Xarthar before lowering his voice. There's been dissent in the ranks. A group of soldiers doesn't trust the alien and wants him gone. They're calling it treason to work with him. Riley's jaw tightened. And you didn't handle this because... They're armed and organized, Mom, Grayson admitted. It's not just a few angry recruits. This could turn into a mutiny. Inside the command center, Riley faced the core members of her team. Grayson had laid out the situation. A splinter group led by Sergeant Callahan had barricaded themselves in the East Storage Wing. They claimed Xarthar was a danger to the colony, a traitor who would sell them out to the invaders. Riley paced the room, her frustration evident. We don't have time for this, she snapped. The invaders could attack at any moment, and we're fighting each other instead of them. It's not just paranoia, Grayson said reluctantly. Callahan claims to have proof. He says Xarthar's species fought alongside the invaders on another colony. Riley stopped pacing, her gaze snapping to Xarthar, who stood silently in the corner of the room. Is it true? She demanded. Xarthar's expression didn't change. My kind once walked a darker path, he admitted. Some chose to align with the invaders. I did not. And we're supposed to take your word for that? Grayson asked, his tone sharp. You can take my actions instead. Xarthar replied, his voice steady. I have stood between your people and annihilation. What more would you require? Riley stepped between them, her mind racing. Callahan's accusations were dangerous, but Xarthar's actions so far had proven invaluable. The colony couldn't survive without him, but neither could it endure a mutiny. Riley gathered a small team and headed to the East Wing. The storage area had been converted into a makeshift stronghold, with overturned crates and barricades blocking the entrances. Callahan's men stood guard, their rifles trained on anyone who approached. Callahan, Riley shouted, standing just outside the barricade. Come out and talk to me. Now. There was a pause, then the sound of boots on metal. Callahan appeared at the top of the barricade, his face hard and unforgiving. Commander, he said, his voice laced with defiance. You've brought the enemy into our home. You've betrayed us. That alien saved our lives, Riley shot back. You think we'd still be standing here if it wasn't for him? Callahan sneered. He's playing a long game. He's waiting for the right moment to turn on us, and you're too blind to see it. Riley took a deep breath, keeping her temper in check. You said you have proof. Let's see it. Callahan hesitated, then signaled to one of his men. The soldier brought out a portable holoprojector and activated it. A grainy recording played, showing a group of Xarthar's kind fighting alongside the invaders on a distant planet. Riley frowned. This proves nothing. Xarthar admitted his people were divided. Some fought with the invaders, others didn't. And how do you know he's not one of them? Callahan demanded. How do you know he's not leading us into a trap? I don't, Riley said evenly. But I do know this. Without him, we don't stand a chance. You've seen what the invaders can do. Do you really think we can survive on our own? Callahan's expression faltered for a moment, but his resolve returned. You're making a mistake, Commander. And when it costs us everything, I won't say I told you so. The standoff was interrupted by the blaring of alarms. Grayson's voice came over the comms. Commander, the invaders are on the move. We've got incoming. 2 waves, both heading straight for the colony. Riley turned to Callahan, her expression grim. We don't have time for this. You want to argue about Xarthar? Fine. But right now, we fight or we die. Callahan hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. This isn't over, he said, stepping down from the barricade. Noted, Riley replied. She turned to her team. Get to your stations. Everyone fights. As the colony braced for the attack, Xarthar stood on the front lines, his golden eyes glowing with an eerie intensity. Riley joined him, her rifle slung across her back. You've made your choice. Xarthar, I said quietly. I hope it is the right one. So do I. Riley replied. She glanced at him. For what it's worth, I believe you. Zarthar didn't respond, but a faint flicker of something, gratitude, perhaps, crossed his face. Together, they turned to face the horizon, where the first wave of invaders was already visible. The battle was about to begin, and the fragile alliance would be tested like never before. The invaders' truth. The battle that followed was unlike anything the colony had ever faced. Waves of invaders surged against their defenses, their sheer numbers and ferocity threatening to overwhelm the humans despite their best efforts. Explosions lit up the night sky, and the air was filled with the deafening roar of weapons and the unearthly cries of the alien attackers. But the humans fought back with a determination born of desperation. Under Riley's leadership and with Exarthar's strategic guidance, they held the line. By dawn, the invaders had retreated, leaving behind a battlefield littered with shattered constructs and fallen bodies. The victory, however, felt hollow. The colony's defenses were in tatters, their resources nearly depleted. Riley stood in the command center, staring at the map of the battlefield. Her face was pale, her exhaustion evident. Around her, her officers exchanged worried glances, but no one spoke. Finally, Exarthar broke the silence. They will return, he said, his voice calm but heavy with certainty. And they will not stop until this planet is theirs. Riley turned to him, her frustration boiling over. Then tell us how to stop them, she demanded. You keep talking about what they want, about how dangerous they are, but you've never explained why. What's their endgame? What do they really want? Zarthar's golden eyes narrowed. For a moment, he seemed to consider whether or not to answer. Then he stepped forward, his imposing presence commanding the room. The invaders are not like you or me, he began. They are not bound by the same desires or needs. They are driven by something deeper, something far more dangerous. Consumption. Riley frowned. Consumption. Of what? Life, Exarthar said simply. The energy that flows through all living things. To them, it is fuel. They harvest it from planets, draining their ecosystems until there is nothing left but a hollow shell. A murmur rippled through the room. The officers exchanged uneasy glances, their fear palpable. You're saying there, what? Feeding on the planet? Riley asked. Arthar nodded. Yes, and this world is rich with life energy, more so than most. That is why they are here. That is why they will not stop. The weight of his words settled over the room like a storm cloud. Riley felt a chill run down her spine. If Exarthar was telling the truth, then their fight wasn't just about survival. It was about the fate of the planet itself. Later that day, Riley called a meeting of the colony's leadership. The room was packed with officers, scientists, and engineers, all of them looking to her for answers. Arthar stood at the edge of the room, his golden eyes watching everything with an unreadable expression. We need to talk about what we're really up against, Riley began, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. Exarthar says the invaders are here to drain the planet's life energy. If that's true, then this isn't just a war for territory. It's a war for survival, not just for us, but for this world. How do we know he's telling the truth? One of the engineers asked, his voice tinged with skepticism. For all we know, he could be leading us into a trap. I've seen what they're capable of, Riley said. The way they move, the way they fight. It's not about conquest. It's about destruction. And if Exarthar's right, then we're running out of time. Exarthar stepped forward, his presence commanding the attention of everyone in the room. You doubt me, he said, his voice resonating with authority. I understand. But your doubt will not save you. If you wish to survive, you must act, and quickly. What do you propose? Riley asked. The heart of the planet, Exarthar said. It is the only thing that can stop them. But to activate it, you must trust me completely. The room fell silent. Riley could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her. trust Axarthar, and they might have a chance to save the planet. But if he was lying, it could cost them everything. Finally, she nodded. We don't have a choice, she said. We'll do it. As preparations began, Riley found herself alone with Axarthar in the command center. She turned to him, her expression guarded. Tell me something, she said. Why are you helping us? What do you get out of this? Axarthar regarded her for a long moment before answering. My kind once failed this world, he said. We allowed the invaders to come, to spread their corruption. I cannot undo the past, but I can ensure it does not happen again. Riley studied him, searching his face for any hint of deceit, but all she saw was resolve. All right, she said finally. Let's save this planet. Axarthar inclined his head. We will. But be prepared, Commander. The cost will be high. That night, as the colony prepared for the next phase of their plan, the sky turned a deep, unnatural red. The invaders were coming, and this time, they would stop at nothing to finish what they had started. Riley stood at the edge of the colony, her rifle slung across her back. Axarthar stood beside her, his golden eyes fixed on the horizon. Together, they waited for the storm to break. The final stand. The sky was a furious red as the invaders began their march toward the colony. Their numbers were endless, stretching across the horizon like a living tide of destruction. The ground trembled beneath their advance, and the air was thick with an unnatural hum, a sinister sound that seemed to echo in the minds of those who heard it. Inside the colony, every human prepared for what they knew could be their final battle. Commander Riley stood at the front gates, her armor scorched from previous battles, but her resolve unshaken. Beside her was Axarthar, the alien warrior who had become both their greatest ally and the center of their doubts. In his hands, the heart of the planet pulsed with a vibrant golden light. It seemed alive, and its energy radiated through the air like a beacon of hope or a warning. They'll be here in less than an hour, Riley said, glancing at Axarthar. You said the heart could stop them. How? Axarthar turned to her, his golden eyes glowing brighter than ever. The heart is a conduit, he explained. It connects the wielder to the core of this planet, awakening its dormant power. But its activation comes with a price. Riley's chest tightened. What kind of price? Axarthar hesitated, then said, The wielder's life. The connection is absolute. To channel the planet's energy is to give oneself to it completely. Once activated, the heart cannot be released. The weight of his words settled heavily on Riley. She had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed was like a punch to the gut. She stared at the heart, its golden light casting long shadows across the ground. And you're just willing to do that? She asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. Axarthar's gaze didn't waver. My life is insignificant compared to the survival of this world. This is my purpose, Commander. It always has been. Before Riley could respond, the colony's alarm blared. A soldier sprinted toward them, his face pale. Commander, the first wave is here. The battle began with a thunderous roar as the invaders clashed against the colony's defenses. Artillery cannons fired relentlessly, their shells lighting up the battlefield. Soldiers fought valiantly, their rifles blazing, but it was clear they were outmatched. For every invader they destroyed, 3 more took its place. The enemy's sheer numbers were overwhelming, and their unrelenting advance pushed the colony closer to collapse. Riley barked orders from the front lines, her voice cutting through the chaos. Hold your positions. Don't let them breach the inner wall. Axarthar, meanwhile, was a force of nature. He moved through the battlefield with a grace and power that seemed almost otherworldly. His energy blasts tore through the invaders like a blade through paper, and his presence alone inspired the soldiers to fight harder. But even his strength had its limits. They're not stopping, one soldier shouted, panic creeping into his voice. They're buying time. Axarthar said, his tone grim. The main force is still coming. Riley turned to him, her face streaked with dirt and sweat. "Then we need to activate the heart. Now." Zarthar nodded. "We must reach the core chamber, but the path will not be easy." The core chamber was located deep beneath the colony, accessible only through a series of tunnels that had been abandoned long ago. Riley gathered a small team, handpicked for their bravery and skill. As they descended into the tunnels, the sounds of battle faded, replaced by an eerie silence. The walls of the tunnel glowed faintly with the same energy as the heart, as if the planet itself was guiding them. Zarthar led the way, the heart's golden light illuminating the path ahead. Riley followed closely, her rifle at the ready. The tension in the air was palpable, and every shadow seemed to hide a threat. "It's too quiet," one of the soldiers muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Stay focused," Riley said, her tone firm. "We don't know what's waiting for us." They didn't have to wait long to find out. As they neared the core chamber, the walls began to shift and pulse, coming alive with energy. From the shadows emerged strange, glowing constructs, guardians left behind to protect the planet's core. They were massive, humanoid figures made of shimmering energy, their forms both beautiful and terrifying. "Hostiles incoming," Riley shouted. The team opened fire, but their bullets passed harmlessly through the constructs. Zarthar stepped forward, raising the heart. "They will not harm us if we prove our worth," he said. "Stay behind me." He advanced toward the constructs, his movements slow and deliberate. The constructs hesitated, their glowing eyes locked onto the heart. For a moment, it seemed as though they might let the group pass. Then one of the soldiers, panicked, fired a shot. The constructs roared to life, their movements swift and deadly. Riley cursed under her breath, pulling the soldier back. "Fall in line. Don't provoke them." Zarthar held up the heart, its light intensifying. The constructs froze, their forms flickering as though caught in an internal struggle. Zarthar spoke in a language Riley couldn't understand, his voice echoing through the chamber. Slowly, the constructs stepped aside, allowing the group to pass. Riley exhaled in relief, though her grip on her rifle didn't loosen. "What did you say to them?" "I reminded them of their duty," Zarthar replied. "To protect the heart, not destroy those who carry it." The core chamber was unlike anything Riley had ever seen. It was a vast, spherical room, its walls covered in glowing patterns that pulsed in time with the heart. In the center was a massive crystalline structure, its surface shimmering with raw energy. "This is it," Zarthar said, his voice filled with reverence. "The core of the planet." He stepped forward, placing the heart into a slot at the base of the crystal. The room shook as the heart fused with the core, its light spreading through the walls like veins of gold. The energy in the room was overwhelming, and Riley could feel it vibrating in her very bones. "Once the heart is fully activated, the planet's defenses will awaken," Zarthar said. "But it will require my life force to sustain it." Riley swallowed hard, her throat dry. "You don't have to do this," she said, though she knew it was futile. Zarthar turned to her, his expression calm and resolute. "Yes, I do. This is the path I chose." Before Riley could respond, the chamber trembled violently. The invaders had breached the tunnels. Time was running out. "Go," Zarthar said. "Lead your people. I will finish this." Reluctantly, Riley nodded. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely audible. Zarthar gave her a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Protect what is yours, Commander. I will protect what is mine." As Riley and her team retreated, the last thing she saw was Zarthar standing before the core, his body bathed in golden light. The ground shook as the planet's power surged to life, and for the first time, Riley allowed herself to hope. "I protect what's mine." The ground above the colony shook violently as the planet itself awakened. Brilliant beams of golden light shot into the sky, illuminating the battlefield like a second sun. The invaders froze mid-advance, their ranks thrown into chaos as the very world they sought to conquer turned against them. Riley stood at the edge of the battlefield, watching in awe as the light spread across the horizon, pulsing like the beat of a giant heart. "He did it," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the roar of energy surging through the air. Thar had made the ultimate sacrifice, binding his life to the heart of the planet to awaken its dormant power. The crystalline structure deep within the core now pulsed with his essence, a beacon of life and energy that connected the planet's natural defenses to its living surface. The invaders, sensing the shift, began their retreat. Their insect-like forms scrambled over one another in a desperate bid to escape the light, which seared through their ranks with deadly precision. Columns of golden energy erupted from the ground, targeting the largest clusters of the enemy. The planet's vengeance was swift and merciless. But Riley's relief was short-lived. A deafening roar split the air, and from the heart of the enemy forces emerged their leader, a towering, grotesque creature that radiated dark energy. Its jagged form seemed to consume the light around it, and its crimson eyes locked onto the colony. "It's not over yet," Riley muttered, gripping her rifle tightly. She turned to the soldiers around her. "Get into position. Hold the line." As the soldiers scrambled to reinforce their defenses, Riley received a transmission from the command center. Grayson's voice crackled through the comms. "Commander, the energy from the heart is destabilizing. If this thing gets too close to the colony, it could destroy everything." Riley's mind raced. They had fought so hard, sacrificed so much, and now it all hung by a thread. She glanced at the towering creature, its every step sending shockwaves through the ground. They couldn't let it reach the core. "Target that thing with everything we've got," Riley ordered. "Cannons, missiles, anything that'll slow it down." The colony's artillery roared to life, launching a barrage of firepower at the creature. Explosions erupted around it, but the dark energy surrounding its form absorbed the brunt of the damage. It continued its march, relentless and unstoppable. Riley felt a surge of frustration. They were out of options, except one. Her gaze shifted toward the horizon, where the golden beams from the heart lit up the sky. If there was any hope left, it lay within the power Thar had unleashed. Riley made a snap decision. She grabbed a transport vehicle and climbed in, motioning for a small team to join her. "We're taking the fight to that thing," she said. "If it gets any closer to the core, it's all over." Her team exchanged uneasy glances, but didn't argue. They loaded into the transport, and Riley slammed the accelerator, speeding toward the battlefield. As they approached the creature, the air grew heavy with the weight of its dark energy. Riley could feel it pressing against her, sapping her strength, but she pushed forward, her determination unyielding. "We need to draw it away from the colony," she shouted over the roar of the engine. "Focus fire on its legs. Slow it down." Her team opened fire, their weapons lighting up the night. The creature roared in anger, its crimson eyes locking onto the transport. It swung a massive, clawed arm, narrowly missing them as Riley swerved to avoid the blow. "We can't keep this up," one of her soldiers yelled. "It's too strong." Riley's mind raced, searching for a solution. Then she remembered Thar's final words, "Protect what is yours." She gritted her teeth. "We're not stopping. We have to trust the heart." As the creature reared back for another attack, the ground beneath it began to glow. Golden light spread across the battlefield, forming intricate patterns that pulsed with energy. The creature hesitated, sensing the change. From the colony, a blinding beam of light shot out, striking the creature square in the chest. It let out a deafening roar, its dark energy clashing violently with the golden power of the heart. The two forces battled for dominance, the air between them crackling with raw energy. Riley brought the transport to a halt, watching in awe as the light intensified. She could feel the planet's energy resonating through her, a connection that was both terrifying and beautiful. And at the center of it all, she felt Thar, his presence strong and unwavering, even in death. "This is it," she murmured. "This is his gift." The creature let out one final roar as the golden light consumed it, its form disintegrating into ash. The battlefield fell silent, the oppressive weight of the dark energy lifting at last. Back at the colony, Riley stood at the edge of the battlefield, staring at the horizon where the golden beams still pulsed faintly. The heart of the planet had saved them, but the cost had been immeasurable. Grayson approached her, his face etched with exhaustion. "We did it," he said. "The invaders are gone." Riley nodded, but her expression was somber. "We didn't do it alone," she said. "HFY made it possible." Grayson followed her gaze toward the horizon. "Do you think he knew this would happen?" Riley's lips pressed into a thin line. He knew, and he chose it anyway. In the days that followed, the colony began to rebuild. The invaders had been defeated, but the scars of the battle remained. The people spoke of HFY with reverence, honoring the alien warrior who had given his life to save their world. At the heart of the colony, a small shrine was erected, a simple monument bearing HFY's words, "I protect what's mine." Riley visited the shrine often, finding solace in its presence. She carried the weight of his sacrifice with her, a reminder of the bond that had been forged between two very different worlds. The planet, now alive with the energy of the heart, flourished. It was no longer just a colony. It was a home. And though HFY was gone, his legacy lived on in the hearts of those he had saved.